The first
Mm.
time, it was just a Tuesday afternoon in the coffee shop down the street, the one where the air smells faintly of cinnamon because the grinder is too close to the pastry's case. I came in after class, headphones in, pretending I had something urgent to read on my phone. Really, I just didn't want to go home to the silence of my apartment. She was already there, sitting in the corner by the window, a book in her lap, the kind of worn paperback that people carry around until the spine barely holds. She had a thermos too, not the kind they sell here, but a dented steel one that looked like it had been with her for years. When she glanced up, her eyes caught mine. Not for long, just long enough that I pretended to fix my sleeve, like it hadn't happened. I ordered the same thing as always, medium black coffee. No sugar, no milk. She looked up again when the barista called my name. "You never change your order, do you?" Her voice was low, casual, like she wasn't sure if she was even asking me. I froze, cup halfway in my hand. "Guess not. Creature of habit." She smiled. Not a full smile, the kind that happens on one side of the mouth first. "There are worse habits." Then she went back to her book, leaving me with the odd sense that I'd been noticed in a way most people don't bother with. I sat a few tables away. Tried to read an article on my phone. Didn't get past the first paragraph. I kept flicking my eyes toward her hands, the way she smoothed the corner of the page before turning it, slow, deliberate. My coffee went cold before I realized I hadn't touched it. That became a pattern. I'd come in, she'd be there sometimes, and we'd exchange fragments. Not conversations, really. Just lines tossed in the quiet. "You read a lot of nonfiction. You never bring a jacket, even when it's raining. You fold your napkins like you're saving them." Little things. Observations. I didn't know why they mattered so much. But I'd walk home and replay them, like they were lines from a song I didn't want to forget. One Thursday, I almost texted my ex, just to fill the silence. Instead, I scrolled up to our last thread, blank, months old, and put the phone back down. I thought of her instead. The way her hair fell forward when she leaned over the book. The faint trace of perfume I only noticed when she walked past my table. That evening, I stayed later than usual, laptop open but untouched. She was closing her book, slipping it into her bag. I told myself not to look, not to wait for something. She stood by my table for a second. "You know." She hesitated, shifting the strap of her bag higher on her shoulder. "You're making me break all my rules." I blinked. The words landed heavier than they should have. "What rules?" Her smile was quick, almost embarrassed. "The ones I don't say out loud." And then she left, the door swinging shut behind her. I sat there, napkin folded neatly in two, coffee stone cold, wondering what it meant. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just a message. "If you're still there tomorrow, maybe I'll tell you." But she was, same corner table, same thermos. Only this time, she glanced up the moment I walked in, as if she'd been waiting. I sat closer than usual, not at her table, but near enough that when she spoke, I wouldn't have to strain to hear. "You stayed." She set her book down, folded at the spine. "I wasn't sure if you were serious." I wasn't sure if I was either. She smiled faintly, but it didn't quite hold. Most of the time I don't say things I mean out loud. I didn't know what to do with that, so I unwrapped the napkin from my cup and started folding it. A small, pointless ritual, but it kept my hands busy. She watched me for a moment, then leaned her elbows on the table. "I got married too young. 22. Thought I knew everything. Turns out, I didn't." I looked up. She hadn't told me her name yet, and here she was offering me something heavier than that. "You're not." I stopped. The word married stuck in my throat. "Not anymore." She filled in the silence for me, like she'd done it 100 times. "He left. Or maybe I left first. Hard to tell." She shrugged, but her eyes stayed down on her hands. "Anyway, that's one of my rules. Don't explain myself to strangers." "Am I a stranger?" Her eyes flicked up, catching mine for a second too long. "Not exactly. But you're not supposed to be anything else, either." That was the first time I felt the gap between us, not just in years, but in the way the world must have looked through her eyes. She'd lived entire lives I hadn't even started. And yet, here we were, sitting in the same stale coffee air, pretending it was nothing. We didn't talk much after that. She read. I scrolled without seeing. Our silences brushed against each other, uneasy but somehow comfortable, like two people sharing an umbrella in the rain without touching. When she finally closed her book, she reached into her thermos, poured a bit of tea into its cap, and slid it toward me. "Try it," she said. It's better than what they serve here. The metal was warm against my fingers. I hesitated, then took a sip. Bitter, faintly sweet. Too strong, but grounding. Not bad, I said. Not bad, she echoed, though her gaze lingered longer than her words did. Later, when she stood to leave, she brushed a crumb from the table. Her hand passed close to mine. Not a touch, not really, but close enough that I felt the air shift. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. I kept thinking I'd walk in one day and she wouldn't be there. That maybe I'd made too much of it all. The looks, the small truths. But the next time, she was sitting in the same corner. Only this time the chair opposite her was empty, as though she'd left it waiting. I hesitated. She noticed. A small lift of her brow, like she was asking without asking. So I Saturday, you don't usually sit here, she said. Didn't feel like being far away today. That made her smile, but faintly. She didn't look at me when she said, dangerous habit. We fell into quiet again. She poured tea, slid the cap toward me without a word. I accepted, our fingers brushing for the first time, not by accident, but not on purpose either. I wanted to say something, anything. But before I could, the bell over the door rang. Hey. It was my friend, Tom, all loud voice and careless timing. He spotted me and grinned, walking over. Didn't know you hung out here. Who's? This is, I started, but she cut in smoothly. Just a neighbor. She stood, slipping her book into her bag. Her voice was even, practiced. We only bump into each other sometimes. Tom laughed, oblivious. Guess you've got better coffee company than me, man. He clapped me on the shoulder, already looking toward the counter. She didn't wait, just nodded at me once, quick, almost formal, and left. For a second, I thought about running after her. But Tom was still there, talking about nothing, and my chest felt tight with something I couldn't explain. Later that week, she wasn't in her usual spot. I stayed longer than I should have, waiting, pretending to read. Nothing. I almost convinced myself it was over, that she'd decided her rules weren't worth bending. But on Thursday, as I was leaving, she came in, stopped when she saw me. I wasn't sure. I began. Neither was I. She stepped closer, voice low. It's easier when no one else notices. I nodded, though the words knotted in my throat. We sat down, quieter than ever. Her hand rested on the table, close to mine. Too close. She traced the rim of her teacup slowly, eyes fixed on it. You ever think, she said finally, about how easy it is to ruin something before it even begins? Yes, I said, quicker than I meant to. Her eyes lifted, met mine. The silence between us felt heavier than words. I shifted, leaning in without thinking. Just an inch, maybe two. Close enough that I saw the faintest line at the corner of her mouth. Close enough that if either of us breathed wrong, something would happen. But she pulled back, just slightly. Enough to make the moment collapse in on itself. I should go, she whispered. And then she was gone, leaving the chair across from me empty again. The next time we saw each other, it wasn't in the cafe. It was outside, late afternoon, the sky low with clouds, air sharp with the smell of rain that hadn't started yet. I was heading back from class, earbuds in, when I saw her sitting on the bench near the bookstore. A place I'd passed 100 times, never stopped. She looked different there, somehow less guarded. Just her, a paper bag at her side, hands folded in her lap. She spotted me before I could decide whether to approach. Walking home, she asked. Yeah. I tugged one earbud out. You? She tapped the bag. Groceries. Too heavy to carry all at once. So I sit. I stood there a second too long, then sat beside her. The bench was narrow. Our coats brushed. For a while, we watched people pass. Couples, kids pulling parents along, someone's dog straining at its leash. The silence was comfortable, until it wasn't. You were with your friend last week. Her voice was quiet, but the words cut sharper than I expected. Tom, she nodded, eyes still on the street. He looked at me like he was trying to figure something out. He didn't think anything of it. I said too quickly. Her lips pressed into a line. That's the problem. It doesn't take much for people to start thinking. I wanted to tell her I didn't care, that I'd sit across from her anyway. Instead, I rubbed my thumb along the seam of my jeans, searching for words. She sighed. You're young. You don't understand what gets whispered, what sticks. That's not fair. My voice cracked a little, too raw. I'm not just some kid with a crush. That made her turn. For the first time, she looked straight at me, no shield. Her eyes held mine, searching, weighing. You shouldn't say things like that. But it's true. The rain started then. Light, uneven drops that darkened the pavement. She didn't move. Neither did I. I wake up, I said, words slipping before I could catch them. And I think about whether you'll be there. In the cafe. That's it. That's my whole day sometimes. Her breath caught, sharp, and she looked away, toward the blur of headlights starting up the street. You don't know what you're doing to me. The bag shifted at her feet. I bent down, picked it up, holding it before she could. Too heavy for her, she'd said. Too heavy, maybe, in more ways than one. Our hands touched around the handle. Not accidental. Not long. Just enough to make the air between us thick. She pulled back first, standing. The groceries pressed against her side, rain dotting her hair. Don't, she whispered, though I wasn't sure if it was to me or to herself. The silence stretched. My throat ached. Finally, I asked, softer than I meant to. Do you want me to stop? And she didn't answer. Or the day after that. At first, I told myself she was busy, that life had pulled her elsewhere. People have errands, work, obligations. But by the fourth day, the corner table looked wrong without her, the light through the window landing on an empty chair instead of her thermos. I tried staying longer, even later into the evening, laptop open, pretending to work. Nothing. By the end of the week, I stopped going altogether. The place felt hollow, like music with the vocals stripped out. One night, restless, I walked the longer way home. Past the bookstore. Past the bench. She wasn't there either. But the paper bag from before came back to me. Groceries too heavy to carry. And I wondered who else noticed small things about her. Who else stepped in when I wasn't around. Then came the text. Sorry, I think I've let this get away from me. No name, but I didn't need one. I stared at the words until my screen dimmed. My thumbs hovered. I typed from what, then deleted it. Tried, I don't want this to stop. Deleted that too. In the end, I didn't send anything. 2 days later, I saw her across the street. She was with someone, older man, graying at the edges, carrying a grocery bag in one hand while she held the other. Not like a lover, though. Familiar, protective. Her son? No. Too old. Brother? Maybe. Ex-husband? My chest tightened at the thought. She caught me staring. For a flicker of a second, her face softened, almost like apology. Then she turned away, walking faster, as if distance could erase recognition. That night, I opened a blank message thread again. Wrote, "Do you want me to disappear?" I sat with the words for an hour, phone glowing in the dark. Then I erased them, shut the screen, tossed the phone face down on the desk. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The next day, I went back to the cafe, just to see. Her chair was still empty. I ordered my coffee, folded the napkin once, then twice, then set it down untouched. Someone came in, not her. Someone laughed too loudly at the counter. The barista asked if I wanted a refill. I shook my head, packed up, left the cup half full. Outside, the street was buzzing, the air thick with the scent of fried food and exhaust. I looked back through the window one last time. The corner table glowed under the late light. Vacant. I almost turned around. Almost sat back down to wait. But instead, I kept walking. The door closed behind me, bell ringing once, sharp, final, and then fading into the noise. It happened on a Sunday evening. Not at the cafe, not on the bench. Her doorstep this time. I hadn't planned to go. I'd walked past her building 3 times, telling myself it was coincidence. But when I finally stopped, my pulse heavy in my ears, I realized I was holding the folded napkin from the cafe in my pocket, like proof that I hadn't imagined any of it. Her door opened before I could knock. She looked surprised, but not shocked, like she'd been expecting this, eventually. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "I know." We stood there, the hallway light buzzing faintly above us. I could smell something, soup maybe, drifting out from her kitchen. Ordinary, grounding. My throat felt dry. "I didn't mean to disappear," she added, leaning against the frame. I needed space." I nodded. "I thought I'd done something." "You didn't." She paused, eyes flicking over me, then away. "That's the problem." We were quiet then. A neighbor walked past, keys jangling, giving us a quick glance before disappearing inside another apartment. The silence stretched. Finally, I asked, "Was that your husband? The man I saw with you?" Her mouth curved, not quite a smile. "My brother. He worries too much." Relief hit me so hard I almost laughed, but it died in my chest when she added, "He thinks I get lonely." He's right. I shifted, the folded napkin warm in my palm. So do I. Her eyes lifted to mine. No avoidance this time. Just tired honesty. "You're too young," she whispered. "Maybe. But I'm here." Something flickered across her face. Fear, longing, both at once. She leaned back slightly, as if putting a wall between us, even as her voice cracked around the edges. "I've spent years building rules to keep me safe. And you?" She stopped, drew in a shaky breath. "You make me want to break them." The words landed between us, fragile and heavy. I stepped closer. Not touching, not yet. Just enough that the air shifted. "Then break them with me." Her eyes closed. For a second, I thought she'd shut me out completely. Then her hand came up, hesitated in the space between us, and rested lightly on my sleeve. Barely there. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a confession shouted into the night. Just the weight of her hand, her gaze when she opened her eyes again, the quiet exhale that felt like surrender. "Okay," she whispered. That was it. 1W. She didn't suddenly start waiting for me at the cafe. I didn't move into her apartment or parade her hand in hand down the street. Life kept its same rhythm, slow, ordinary, stitched together by small routines. But something was different. On Thursdays, she still sat by the window, thermos at her side, paperback folded in her lap. And I still ordered black coffee, folded the napkin, pretended not to check the door until she arrived. But when she did, there was no hesitation anymore. I sat with her. Always. We didn't fill the air with words. Sometimes we didn't even speak for half an hour. She'd pour me a capful of tea. I'd grimace at the bitterness, and she'd laugh. Soft, barely there, but real. That laugh stayed with me more than anything. One morning, weeks later, I caught her glancing at the clock on the cafe wall. It was 8:47 a.m. exactly. I didn't ask, not then. But later, on the bench outside the bookstore, I did. "Why that time?" She smiled faintly, eyes on the passing cars. "It was the time my son was born. Everything in my life changed at 8:47 a.m. She paused, then added, "And again, the day I realized I was waiting for you to walk through that cafe door at the same time." I didn't say anything. Just let the words settle, heavy and light all at once. Seasons shifted. Leaves turned, fell, scattered. Winter came, and I finally brought a jacket. She teased me about it, shaking her head like it was proof I was growing up. I didn't argue. Sometimes she cooked soup, just like the night I stood at her doorstep. I'd wash the dishes while she dried, the kind of ordinary intimacy that felt louder than any declaration. Sometimes, when silence stretched long in her kitchen, she'd rest her hand on my sleeve the way she had the first time. No words, no grand gesture. Just that weight. Enough. We never talked about rules again. Not directly. But every time we chose to stay, every time we showed up, we were breaking them together. I used to think love had to be loud, fireworks, grand gestures, things people could point to and name. But with her, it was the opposite. Love was the space she left me in her silence. The warmth of her thermos cap pressed into my palm. The folded napkin I didn't need to fold anymore, because my hands had somewhere else to be. And in the quiet of those mornings, in the corner of that ordinary cafe, I realized life had finally finished the sentence. Speech balloon engagement close. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next? But it was everything.